Reading with your kids.
Hola, nihao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, mona miliwanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedlie, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Good Pods, Himalaya, Ghana, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Shannon Hale. She is here to celebrate her brand new audiobook. It's called Best Friends. Before we invite Shannon into the studio, I want to let you know that your school needs a podcast. That's right. Your school needs a podcast. It's going to enrich minds, amplify voices, and connect families. Are you ready to embark on an innovative journey that merges education with entertainment? Our school podcasting services offers an unparalleled opportunity to embrace the art of podcasting enriched with the magic of literature. The Reading with Your Kids podcast has been helping families all over the world grow closer through reading since 2017. We have a library of over 800 hours of interviews with many of the most respected authors in children's literature. Creating a school podcast with us gives you access to a treasure trove of content that you can use to captivate your audience. Let these stories spark discussions, ignite imagination, and cultivate a love of reading with your kids and with their family members. You can learn all about this really exciting new service that we are offering to schools at our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and then clicking on the Your School Needs a Podcast button way up at the top of the page. We want to help you create your own school podcast. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Utah. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new audiobook. It's called Best Friends. It is the audiobook based on her graphic novel of the same title. Please welcome to the show, Shannon Hale. Hey, Shannon, how are you?
Hi, great to be here. Thanks.
I'm delighted to have you on. I have to tell you, I think this is, I don't know if this is the first time we've celebrated an audiobook, but it is absolutely the first time we've celebrated the audio version of a graphic novel.
I imagine, yeah.
So I'm really excited. First off, tell us about the story we'll be experiencing with Best Friends.
Best Friends is actually the second book in my graphic novel memoir trilogy. So there's Real Friends, Best Friends, and Friends Forever. And they are all autobiographical. They are the graphic novel versions of my childhood and difficulties I had growing up with friendships, and I struggled with undiagnosed anxiety and OCD, and they are beautifully illustrated by my best friend and one of the premier illustrators in the world, Lei Wen Pham. And Best Friends is only about 6th grade. So I wrote Real Friends. It was about 3rd through 5th grade, and I realized I had so much more to say. So they're not stories in that you have to have read the previous one or the next one, but Best Friends focuses on this very interesting transitional age of 6th grade, where it feels like all the rules are suddenly changing. What friendship means and how friends who are loyal to each other start speaking about each other behind each other's back. There's changing power and social dynamics. There's more interaction between girls and boys. And then underneath it all, this undercurrent of anxiety and me with my big emotions, not understanding what was going on, how to control my emotions. I was afraid of them, and the OCD that was popping up even more strongly at this age was overcoming me.
You know, you said in 6th grade, it feels like the rules are changing. I don't know if it feels like it. I think they are changing. Our relationships when we get to that age, they really do take a turn. I think mostly because we're changing so much.
Absolutely. The brain is developing, and girls' brains develop a little faster than the boys' brains. And you really start to see that in sixth grade. I've talked to sixth grade teachers who say at the beginning of the year, they've got one set of students and they go home for winter break, and then they come back from winter break and they've got another set of students, because even just like 2 weeks away from them, they could see how quickly everything is changing. Girls at that age, 12, so I've got two 12-year-olds right now at home, and I get to see that firsthand. They're my youngest of 4 kids. And girls they're 12 is such a strange age because they're not kids anymore, but they're not teenagers. And it's 1 year of just intensity, so much intensity as their brains are developing so quickly, but their experience and their perspective hasn't had enough years to qualify all the new information that their brains are inputting into them. Everything they're noticing, every subtle gesture and facial expression from their peers, from their parents. And it's very confusing. It's very emotional. And I have so much love and compassion for kids this age, because they're not prepared for all the input they're getting in a very busy, chaotic world with these brains. So the more books and stories we have that can walk them through what they're going through, and in a story way to show them, one reason why I want to do this as a memoir is because I wanted to show them, hey, I went through this too, and it was tough for me. But you have a built-in happily ever after, because I get to grow up and then, become a writer, and things are going to be okay eventually for me, even though this is a tough age. And I think telling kids can smell, BS from a mile away. So telling them a true story is, most of my books I write are fiction, nothing against fiction, but sometimes being able to show them memoir and say, this is true, this really happened to somebody else. And it's not an extreme somebody. I didn't have an overly traumatic childhood or anything. It's going to be pretty comparable to, the average experience. And yet it still was hard, and I still got through it. And these kinds of books can help hold a kid's hand as they go through these times.
I think one of the things that makes it so hard is that kids don't realize that their peers are going through the same thing. If we're on a soccer team and we're facing the champion and we're getting killed on the field, but we're all going through that, or if we're facing some kind of weather emergency, we're all kind of struggling. How are we going to deal with it? But we're all kind of going through this. I think a lot of times what happens with kids when they get to be that age, that 12, and those changes are happening, they do their best to hide the fact that they're changing. And I remember very well when my son and his 12-year-old friends were in the van one day, and they were all talking, and it was obvious that they were all trying very, very hard to let each other know that they knew everything that was going on. In reality, none of them knew anything that was going on.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think that's one thing that stories do better than anything else. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, having one-on-one relationships with people is the most important piece in our emotional and social health. But at this age, it's so hard to be vulnerable with your peers. So it's really hard to know through your peers that they're going through the same things. So the magic of storytelling is that they can get inside the head of other characters and really understand at that empathetic level, oh, other people are going through this too. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that anything is more important than stories and books at this age for emotional and social growth.
Yeah, absolutely. You spoke about the anxiety that you experienced as a 12-year-old. How do you see kids experiencing anxiety being helped now as opposed to the help or lack of help that you received when you were 12?
It's night and day. We didn't talk about mental health when I was a kid. I had obsessive compulsive disorder and just a high level of anxiety I start to measure it from about third or fourth grade. And my family was aware of it. My mom took me to a lot of doctors, and they didn't have any helpful input. I can look back at my report cards show, from fifth grade, for example. I found it the other day, and it showed that I missed 45 days of school in fifth grade. So it was a significant, and there were physical effects of anxiety in terms of stomach aches and feeling ill and really being unsure, did I have the flu or what was happening? And nobody letting me know that emotional and mental health affects your physical body as well. So I just felt weak and sickly all the time. And the OCD is a really strange thing because it's something that you can't, especially as a kid, explain what's going on because the thoughts are so strange. And at that age, you think that you're responsible for your own thoughts. Mm-hmm. Or even for myself, I grew up in a religious household. So I thought that often, I don't get into this in the book, but to show you the level of confusion, I thought that the thoughts that OCD were giving me about telling me constantly about how bad I was, I thought that might be God telling me about how bad I was.
That's really incredible. I can't imagine the pain that you must have been going through as somebody who had this faith foundation and hearing in your brain the voice that you thought was God telling you that you weren't a good person.
Yeah. So fundamental, it attacks your fundamental sense of self and self-worth. OCD is a tricky little monster and you can't really explain it. I mean, I could not explain it, but the basic tenets of OCD, just for people who might not know, because sometimes people will say, oh, I'm so OCD when what they really mean is I like to have a clean house, or I'm fastidious. That's not what OCD means. So the O in OCD is obsessive, which stands for the obsessive thoughts. So these thoughts come into your brain, and we all get unwanted thoughts or just thoughts that pop into our head. But our brain is really good at sorting through like the junk mail thoughts. You have a thought pop in your head of like, oh, is my house going to burn down? And you're like, why would I think that? There's no evidence that is. And so you toss it out. An OCD brain might latch onto that and it loops it. So it's like a, the old record player where it gets stuck and it's just looping around and around. Is my house going to burn down? Is the house going to burn down? And with that thought comes this real anxiety, and it feels like your body is telling you there is danger. All your alarm bells are going off. Your adrenaline is spiking. There is danger. Your house is going to burn down. So that's the O part of it. And then the compulsion, the C part of it, is your brain gives you a way to stop the loop. Sometimes it makes sense. Oh, it never really makes sense, but sometimes there's a logic to the connection. Like, I have to go home and check and see if my house is burned down. And then once I do that, then the obsessive thoughts will stop or pause until next time, and the feelings will go away. But sometimes it could be, I need to count to 30 and turn around 3 times. Or I need to open and shut the blinders 30 times and then sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. Mm-hmm. And so explaining to somebody that your brain is requiring you to do this, it sounds like you're crazy. But when you're inside of it, it makes a kind of sense. But it gets worse. The OCD monster, the more you do the compulsions, the more it demands. The rituals that it takes to get rid of the thoughts increase and increase until it just takes up so much of your time and brain space. And then people think you're not a good student because you're distracted, or that your friends think you're mean because you're ignoring them, but really you're going through all this internal struggle.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Excuse me. It's really incredible. You were suffering. You had parents, it sounds like, who were very in tune with you and who were trying very hard to get you help, bringing you to doctors, but the doctors are sitting there saying, I don't know. That must have added tremendously to the stress and anxiety that you were feeling.
Yes. I felt like it was my fault, the way I was feeling, because if doctors didn't see there was anything there, that it must have been all in my head. But of course, I was going to doctors for the physical reasons because of the stomach aches. So they're checking and for the lack of energy. And, it seemed like I had flu or something, chronic illness. I wasn't going to them about the thoughts because I was going to medical doctors. I didn't think to tell them about the thoughts. I didn't think that they were connected. And nobody asked me those questions. I think now doctors know to ask those questions. If you've got a kid with chronic stomach aches, quite often it's going to be, one of several things. It might be like, a dairy intolerance, etc. But one of those things is going to be anxiety, and they will ask those questions. Back then in the 80s, they didn't ask those questions. Yeah. So I was left just feeling like there was something wrong with me, fundamentally. Yeah. And that's a heavy place to be. Absolutely. But it's a genetic thing. So I've since learned so much about OCD with my kids, with my extended family. It's really common in our family. It's as common as breakfast cereal in our family. And one thing that makes me really happy is that now we live in an environment where it's not a shameful thing. This is a no-fault disorder. It's genetic. It gets triggered by environmental things. And we talk about it openly without shame. And the world today is just more understanding. If my parents had realized what it was and got me a therapist in 6th grade, there would have been shame involved. It would have been kept as a secret. I would have been worried my friends would judge me or not like me anymore because of it. And I'm so glad today we're just so more open about these things, that mental illness is the same as physical illness. It's a medical issue. Our brain is part of our body. It's not laziness. It's not lack of morality. It's just part of our system, and there is help.
Yeah. I think that this is a good place to kind of celebrate the fact that as powerful as the graphic novel version of Best Friends is in terms of helping kids understand these different things, I think the audio version could be even more powerful, because I'm guessing that a lot of families are going to listen to this on the way to school, on the way to ballet or soccer, and it's naturally going to launch a lot of conversations about these topics that are so very important, not only to be aware of, but to talk about, and to give kids a chance to talk about it with an adult that they can trust and love, and kind of help them sort through some of the feelings that they also might be experiencing.
Yes, I love graphic novels. I'm passionate about them. I started to create graphic novels before, so early in the 2000s, that I had to tell people what graphic novels were, because people thought it meant graphic as in with graphic, violent content. Mm-hmm. But they reach readers that certain readers that no other books do. And one reason why I wanted to do these memoirs as graphic novels is because when kids are going through a hard time, sometimes it's really hard for them to, like was for me, to voice to their grown-ups what's happening. But with a graphic novel, they could point to this picture and say, this is how I'm feeling, because pictures are so great at communicating in a single image what's happening. But at the same time, graphic novels are hard to read as a family. Mm-hmm. They're really more of an individual book. Like, two members of the family can read it and they can discuss it, of course. But to read it side by side is a little more challenging, because you want to have that book right in your hands as you really devour those images. So with the audiobook version, like you were saying, absolutely, it's a way to engage with the story as a group. You're all listening to the audio at the same time, and then you can pause it and discuss it. And additionally, one fun thing about it is done with a full cast. But I voice the narration because it is actually me. The narrator is me talking to the reader about my experiences. And then the voice of young me is voiced by a professional actress who's younger, which only makes sense. And then at the end, I have the author's note where I talk really intimately about what my experiences were. And kids get to hear that in my own voice, and they get to hear this adult who went through these things they may be going through, just telling them the truth of that. And then as an additional bonus, at the end of the audiobook, we had this great experience where I mentioned I have two 12-year-olds right now. Well, we got into a recording booth, and I interviewed my two current 6th graders about what sixth grade is like for them today versus, they respond to the story of what it was like for me, what's same, what's different. And they talk about the challenges of sixth grade for themselves. And that turned out to be, I guess, my favorite part of the whole process. It's wonderful to hear these two sixth graders, because my kids really will just lay it out. For better or worse, they are extremely honest and they will tell you everything. And they make themselves vulnerable and talk about the realities of the challenges. So that's a really fun bonus at the end.
That sounds fantastic. Audiobooks are my preferred way of consuming books these days, and has been for a long time now. Back in the days when they used to come in, like, a Stephen King novel would come in like 30 cassette tapes that you'd have to change, and
Right.
But it is such a fun way to consume stories together, and I think it's a wonderful way to spend all those that we spend so much time in vehicles these days, especially anybody who lives in the burbs or out in rural areas. We're spending so much time driving from here to there in different activities, and I think it's really a fun way for families to come together and engage in conversations that are smart, that are deep, and that aren't as scary for kids. We've talked here on the podcast a lot about the fact that, we have those conversations in air quotes. It's, kids that turn off right away if they're talking about themselves. But if you're talking about those topics through characters, then kids are open up and they have all sorts of opinions, and they're much more likely to share those ideas and opinions with you.
Absolutely. I love audiobooks. I am not a natural auditory learner.
Mm-hmm.
That was always a struggle for me in school. I learned better by reading. I need to see it in order to remember it. So when it was just lectures by teachers or professors, I have a harder time retaining that information. And so I was reluctant to do audiobooks for a long time. But then as a busy mom, I tell you what, changed everything for me was the Libby app. Oh, I could sing the praises of the Libby app. With my library card, I can sign up for it. I can download audiobooks for free. They return them automatically, so I don't have to worry about late fees. I listen to audiobooks now when I'm driving alone, or when I'm doing laundry, or at the grocery store, and I'm reading so much more than I ever was because of audiobooks. And interestingly, my ability to retain information that's auditory has increased as of the last few years as I've done this, to the point where I can do more complex tasks and still listen and absorb the information. And I can even listen to the audio at 1.25 or 1.5 speed and still retain it. So I feel like, ooh, I'm an old dog, but I'm still learning new tricks.
That's wonderful. I have to tell you, I love that Best Friends is available as a graphic novel and also as an audiobook. I think it's going to be a great service to loads and loads of families. Are you considering developing the other two books in the series into audiobooks?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we probably will. This one turned out so great and so fun. Because it was a graphic novel, it's an unusual audiobook because it's more like a radio drama than a traditional audiobook. Rather than have me go in and write a lot more narration describing what's happening in each visual, we used a lot of sound effects and music cues. So it's a really fun and different kind of experience to read, but the responses so far have been tremendous.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. There's so many things to celebrate here. Not only about the book, about the fact that we are helping kids with anxiety and OCD better these days than when you were a kid, and we're able to talk to our kids about the experiences and the changes in their bodies and their brains that they're experiencing when they're in sixth grade and that age, and we can celebrate the fact that we have great audiobooks to listen to, including the one from our guest, Best Friends, written by Shannon Hale. Shannon, where can folks go to find out more about Best Friends and find out more about all the books that have come from your imagination?
I have a website, shannonhale.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find out more about the audiobook also through Macmillan Audio.
We've had a great time speaking to the author and the narrator of Best Friends, brand new audiobook from our friend Shannon Hale. Hey, Shannon, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Selena Gonzalez. She'll be here. Will you be here? Hope so. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, Shannon Hale. Please be sure to check out Best Friends. Audiobooks are wonderful. I love audiobooks. I think you and your family will love them too. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Soji Franklin, Ann O'Leary, Monica Rivera Sosa, Madison Darris. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.